This is the Television Enthusiast Podcast, The Weekly Set. Episode 3, recorded February 12th, 2015. Welcome to the Television Enthusiast Podcast, The Weekly Set. I am your host, Tyson. Joining me today are Will.
Hello.
And Kat.
Hi.
Today we are going to be discussing some news items as well as what we've been watching. So let's start with the news first. I put two news stories aside. You know, if there's something else one of you guys want to add in that happened in the last week, you know, feel free to jump in. But the big news story is that apparently there's going to be a Legend of Zelda series coming through Netflix.
That blindsided me completely when I saw it.
Yeah. I think the part that blindsided me was the words live action.
Yeah.
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 Well,
I could
because
totally
everything
see
else
it as animated.
This is the first video game. I mean, this is like there's been so few video game adaptations. Everything else has been comic book. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, it kind of came out of nowhere.
What got me was it's a Nintendo property. Nintendo doesn't usually license out their properties like for television shows or movies like very liberally, or at all, actually. They've
been very careful ever since, you know, the Super Mario Brothers fiasco, you know?
Right, yeah.
Sure.
So that was way out of left field when they announced, like, Netflix was working on this deal to make a live-action Legend of Zelda. I was like, that sounded like an April Fool's joke.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Taking a look at your calendar going, wait. Did this leak out early?
I love the description, like, they apparently had for it, too. They said, Game of Thrones for a family audience.
I'm sorry, I don't see
Isn't that like saying porn for Puritans?
Yeah.
The thing is, Legend of Zelda has, like, next to nothing in common with Game of Thrones. I think that's a really bad direction to take it.
There's castles and princesses and swords and horses, and that's about all it has in common.
Yeah.
It's still the live action thing that throws me, because I could actually really see this working as like an animated, you know, show or something.
Right.
I could totally see this working. You know, they do it CG. They could even get the look,
That'd
get
really
a similar
cool
look that some of the games have had.
Yeah.
And, you know, something like, you know, I don't know how familiar you guys are with the Zelda games, but if you looked at like Wind Waker or something, it has this very like cartoony kind of vibe to it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And I could totally have seen something like that working, you know, some very expressive, you know, a little kid kind of going on an adventure, and it would be kind of cool to watch, but live action?
People used to derisively refer to Wind Waker as a Saturday morning cartoon, because that's the way it looked. So yeah, they could definitely done that live action. If they give it a decent enough budget, they probably could do a good live action Zelda series. There's no reason why it can't be live action if the budget's there.
Exactly.
I'm just wondering tonally how they're going to pull that off, because, you know, like, I can understand them being able to do it with the budget. Even on a somewhat small budget, I can see them do it, but it's like the tone, you know, is this going to turn into something really schlocky, or is it are they going to be able to make it work?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about.
I think they should keep the tone in line with Ocarina of Time, with the tone in that game, which is, you know, mostly serious with some humor sprinkled in there, and also with the tendency, Ocarina of Time did have a tendency to get pretty dark at moments too.
Well, I think a lot of the best Zelda games have gotten dark, because one of my favorites is Twilight Princess, and that's one of the darkest in the series. I would kind of like to see them go in that direction, but I'm with you on the tone. I think just because there's never been a Zelda series that didn't have a very strong sense of tongue-in-cheek humor to the whole thing, and that could be a really hard thing to capture, especially in a live-action format.
I don't know if anybody's seen, like, the old Zelda cartoon.
Oh, just the clips of Link being really obnoxious.
Yeah, we don't need somebody saying, "Excuse me, princess." So that would be pretty rough. But, who knows, who would have thought they would have been able to pull off Game of Thrones as well as they did?
Sure.
That was kind of shocking. People didn't think they'd be able to pull it off with the budget and everything, but that's a pretty amazing show, and they were able to do it.
They totally have. Yeah. My one concern is, as much as I genuinely love the Zelda series, I still feel like the story itself has never been, like, Game of Thrones has really, really rich source material in the text, and Zelda kind of doesn't have that same thing. Like, I love Zelda, but you don't always necessarily play Zelda for the story, at least in my opinion.
No.
Like, the story itself is still relatively the same in every game, and there's not a whole lot of nuance and complexity to it, so I worry about how they could spin that off into an actual TV series.
Plus, the protagonist is a silent protagonist.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is going to be a tricky thing to overcome. I mean, if you try to change that and make Link all chatty, I think people are going to tune out pretty quickly, I
think that's part of what made him so ridiculous in the cartoon series, is he almost became like a caricature.
Yeah.
He was very chatty in that.
Very chatty.
But, there's some ways they can pull it off, I guess. I mean, I love Twilight Princess as well. I think Midna was an amazing character.
She's awesome.
Yeah, and I really, that was like, of all the Zelda games, that's like the one character I think that really popped out of everything,
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I think, they've done some interesting things with Zelda story-wise. Majora's Mask, probably the most interesting.
Yeah, definitely. As far as concept goes,
sure.
And like, Majora's Mask is probably the best. And it's also just really interesting stylistically, it's got a cool look to it. The purples and the color palette, it's very dark.
Oh, it is.
It's very moody and surreal, and I could see something like that working, if they said, the best way we can mask kind of the areas where this might turn cheesy is just to make it so just weird that,
Yeah.
that like it just kind of transports you, and you just kind of, it hits your suspension of disbelief, and you just kind of believe that, okay, it's okay that this is weird because this is just weird,
What I worry about the most is, I think, the same thing that has been a struggle for pretty much every attempt at adapting a video game, is how many story and world decisions are made for the purpose of being gameplay mechanics. Like, for instance, if they did decide to do Majora's Mask, are they going to do the turning back of 3 days at every point? Because, that decision was made to enable a particular gameplay mechanic, and I worry that's not going to translate over well into a narrative,
Right. I don't know, because I actually love that narrative tool. I mean, it usually works better in movies because they're shorter form, but it's, the Groundhog's Day tool,
Sure.
And
At the same time, I'm totally just zeroing in on this one mechanic here, and so this isn't necessarily a criticism of all. The one concern I would have about that is, I think, actually something we see in Groundhog Day is, in that case, only the person who's experiencing the switching back in time gets to experience any kind of development or progression.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I mean, obviously this is pure speculation. Who knows if they would even use Majora's Mask.
They have done some TV series that follow the Groundhog's Day, model. So there was a show, it lasted, it was like a mid-season show that came in with I think a 7-episode run called Daylight. That did, a Groundhog's Day style, and the whole series was like that. It wasn't just one episode. But they've also done that where they've had, an episode of some good shows. Some of the best episodes of some shows have been Groundhog's Day episodes.
Sure,
Supernatural had one of the best ones, I thought.
Yeah, Supernatural had a great one.
Yeah.
But I think, I guess...
Xena had a great one.
It works well for a single episode. I worry about it being a series-long thing, And so say hypothetically they did decide to adapt major elements of Majora's Mask, I would worry about something like that, both because of the gameplay mechanic nature of it, and like I get what you're saying. It's a very cool mechanic. I just worry about what some of the kind of repercussions would be.
Yeah, well, they could do it in a somewhat even an episodic kind of way, you know? I mean, if they did it like a limited series and made it like, you know, each episode's like a full hour and maybe there's like 6 episodes in the series or something like that, they could literally do like one mechanic per episode and just kind of have it kind of like the Zelda series where the episodes kind of stand on their own. Like there's something kind of connecting them loosely, like themes and kind of mythology and stuff, but it's all, they'd be like, kind of like their own Zelda game. So they could do like a Majora's Mask-esque Groundhog's Day kind of episode. And they could do like something that's more like, you know, I don't know, like the Split Worlds in Twilight Princess or you know,
the Giant Ocean in Wind Waker.
Yeah.
I think
they could totally play with that, so.
I think I'm more optimistic that Netflix is apparently doing this than anybody else, because Netflix is, with their shows, they've shown that, first of all their shows are of high quality so far.
Sure.
And they spend. I mean, Marco Polo is the second highest budget show on TV after Game of Thrones.
Yeah, they're not afraid to spend. They're not afraid to put the budget in. I don't know how much creative freedom their creators have making shows for them, but they don't seem to be creatively restrictive in their programming.
No, yeah.
That's a good point.
Maybe it's that we think of television in a certain lens, and Netflix and these other kind of streaming services are starting to kind of break that mold, you know? So this could just be something that it doesn't make sense to us 100% because we've never experienced something like it before, and maybe we will.
Yeah.
I know that the current director of the Zelda series, Eiji Aonuma, one time they had brought up, you know, the possibility of a Zelda movie, and they were asking him in some interview, and he said if he did like a Zelda movie, or if they had it, he'd want it to somehow be kind of like interactive in a way. Like where, you know, you'd be in theaters and it'd be like almost like a choose your own adventure or something, and there'd be voting or something, some way to make an interactive element to it. And while that would be kind of weird in a movie theater, I could see somehow putting some kind of an element like that into like a Netflix series.
I'm gonna say right up that I would be really uncomfortable with that. Movies and television are not interactive, and they're better for it, and they need to be kept separate from video games. We should not be trying to incorporate what works in video games into other formats, because it's going to ruin those formats. Also, narrative is not a democracy, and it never, ever, ever should be.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. On the flip side of the coin, I think video games should not be movies, or attempt to be movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No. They're two different mediums. Let's keep it like that.
Amen.
Yeah.
I don't know though, because if it's the majority choosing like how things are going to develop as far as like a TV show, I could understand, you know, like, you know, not having a democracy in the voting for the storytelling, but if the story is designed and you have limited choice and you're just kind of shaping small decisions, you know, and how the kind of thing shapes, I don't know, it could be an interesting experiment. I don't know if it's going to end up being the best thing, but that's what Aonuma said he'd be interested in if they did that. So that's why I'm kind of wondering about it.
If that's the case, then maybe Zelda shouldn't be a movie, and that's okay. Like
I don't think it should. Yeah.
No one has successfully turned a video game into a movie, and maybe that's a lesson that we all need to learn, and maybe we could stop trying for a while.
Right.
Yeah, it's. I think, I agree with that it probably shouldn't be. And, you know, honestly, as odd as it sounds, I think the one that could make like a really good movie of a Nintendo property is Super Mario Brothers. And as bad as the original movie is, if they did it like Pixar, and, you know, like, look at what Pixar did with, like, Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah.
You know, what if they did, you know, and Wreck-It Ralph had, like, Bowser in it, you know? What if they did, like, a Wreck-It Ralph, like, spin-off sequel or something, but it was about, like, Mario?
They would have to be willing to be very meta. Because I felt like Wreck-It Ralph was significantly meta, and that worked to its benefit.
Exactly. It would have to be. I agree with that. But that, I could see that totally working, you know, as like a really kind of fun Mario movie, and you know,
sure.
But yeah, I think you could do that with Mario, because Mario doesn't really, it's not like you're gonna ruin the purity of the story of a Mario game, you know? Or it's not gonna hurt the mood either. With Zelda, like if you did something really weird and meta with Zelda, I think it would ruin the mood, you know?
Yeah.
That the game tries to put on you. But with Mario, there's, you know,
you
there.
You can do whatever with Mario, really. I mean, it's not, you know, as long as the characters are there, as long as the basic structure is there, like the Mushroom Kingdom and stuff.
They're jumping on flagpoles and throwing when they hit mushrooms.
You don't like, you don't get too weird with it, like the Super Mario Brothers movie. Yeah, you can pretty much do whatever. I mean, they had that, like, the Zelda cartoon, they had that Mario cartoon too. And a lot of people like to rag on it, but I think for a cartoon, those cartoons were perfectly fine. In my opinion.
Yeah, it was definitely better than the Zelda.
Definitely better than the Zelda one, yes. But that's because...
Yeah, I actually kind of liked Captain N. Do you remember that?
I remember Captain N.
Captain N was kind of meta before its time. It had all these different characters from different video games kind of within it.
I was so disappointed watching Captain N when I was a kid that Mario wasn't a main character. That Link wasn't a main character. Although they did do an episode with Link, which was really cool. But, like, the main guys were like, well, they were like Mega Man, I knew,
It was like Simon Belmont, yeah.
I knew, but I didn't really know who Pit was, and he was like a main character, and there was also like...
Then they added Game Boy as a character.
That was weird, I thought. They had Game Boy as a character.
So, besides that, the other kind of news story we have here is, it's about the Evil Dead TV series, and, it looks like Ash's sidekicks have been cast. So, you wrote this story, Will. Can you give me any details?
Yeah. So, apparently in the new Evil Dead series, Ash is not going to be fighting the Deadites by himself. He's actually gonna meet up with two other people who are gonna end up joining him in his fight, and there's not much to it. They gave some character descriptions of who these characters are and what their relationship to Ash is going to be. They just gave like some brief descriptions of them. And
it sounds like one of them is kind of like taking on an almost like squire-like role to him.
Yeah, one of them's going to be like almost like his apprentice.
Yeah, and another one is kind of just got trapped into everything.
Yeah, she just gets dragged into it through some circumstance, I'm sure. Just gets dragged into it, and I guess they end up being Ash's companions for the run of the series. So I think that's neat. I don't know, don't really have much of an opinion on it.
Yeah, there's not too much to go by just from that, you know. We still don't really know kind of tonally what the show is going to be like, because the Evil Dead series is all over the map.
Oh yeah, the first Evil Dead was like straight horror, and then they kept progressively adding comedy to it, and to the point where Army of Darkness was a total horror comedy.
Well, Army of Darkness was also kind of like an action adventure.
Yeah, it had those elements too, so it was like tonally, that was all over the place.
So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go, because when they recently did the Evil Dead remake, which Rami Tapper and Campbell were all involved in.
Which I understand went back to straight horror again.
Yeah, it went straight back to horror, and at the very end of it, there was like a little nod to Ash. They had like a little, like literally, like Ash kind of nods. It was like a post-credit sequence, and it was just him, like, looking, and that was it, you know? So, who knows, you know? It's gonna be a half-hour episode, so that kind of is more leaning towards comedy, but it's also on a cable channel, which means those are full half hours, which kind of leads more into the dramedy territory.
I'm guessing it's probably going to be more of a comedy in the vein of Army of Darkness than anything. That's just my guess. I don't know.
But yeah, I guess that pretty much takes us through our news.
I did see something about 10 minutes ago. I know from the show notes that you guys dropped Gotham. I think at least you did, Tyson.
Yeah, I did.
I'm still watching.
But apparently, like, they just posted on their Twitter, they posted a picture of, like, the Joker.
Hey.
So they're gonna have the Joker on Gotham now.
Yeah, I saw the preview. He's appearing for the first time next week. Are you caught up on Gotham, Will?
I am not.
Oh, okay. I just barely caught up on the show. But yeah, I saw the preview for that and did a massive eye roll.
Right. I don't think they should be doing the Joker on this show.
No.
No. And from the pic I saw, he didn't even look very good, in my opinion. I was like, okay.
Well, and if there's one thing Gotham doesn't need, it's A, more characters, and B, more Batman villains.
Right.
I mean, there's way too many of both.
I mean, by the time Batman grows up, like, all of his villains will be established.
I know! It's preposterous.
It is.
The show has grown on me a substantial amount, but it definitely still has its flaws.
Right, I mean...
I finally gave up on that in Sleepy Hollow.
For what I watched...
Sleepy Hollow got too silly for me, and Gotham is just... I just couldn't do it anymore. I was falling behind on a bunch of my shows, and I'm like, I gotta scrap some of these off my list, and those are the first two that came to mind.
Sure.
Gotham is silly, but I enjoy it for what it is. Like, yeah, it's no denying it's a silly show.
Gotham has a fantastic cast. I'm gonna throw that out there. I think they
have
definitely great actors.
I think the guy who plays
Penguin?
the one detective there.
No.
Gordon's Harvey Bullock.
He's great.
I think Harvey Bullock is fantastic in this show.
Yeah.
I love that actor. He just has really bad dialogue, though.
I think the writing lets him down, but I think he himself knows this character in and out, and he conveys everything about him perfectly. He's one of my favorite actors on the show.
Oh yeah, he's a great actor, period. I've loved him in a lot of things he's done. He was on an FX series called Terriers. It was his first, like, role where he was the main character of the series, because he's one of those guys that always kind of shows up as a supporting character.
Right, he's a character actor, yeah.
So he was in Blade, and he was in Sons of Anarchy and Vikings recently. But yeah, he was on a show called Terriers.
Yeah,
he had his own sitcom for a while.
I'm familiar with him for.
But he had a show on FX called Terriers that lasted one season. It was really good, and the strongest part of the show was this kind of a relationship between these two friends, and he was one of them, and the other one was I don't know the actor's name, but he was on True Blood. He was in the first season of True Blood. Did you either of you watch that?
Yeah, I did. Who did he play?
He was the guy that turned out to be the killer.
Oh, okay. Okay, yep.
Yeah. So it was he and Donald Logue, I think is the guy's name from Gotham.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
And yeah, he's very good. I loved him in that. I was excited about Gotham because of his casting, and then I realized that he's kind of he's doing a lot with what he's got. That's all I can say.
I mean, yeah, I'm disappointed by Gotham because wasn't what I was hoping it was going to be, which, the idea of a gritty cop show set in Gotham City is a great idea. Fundamentally, that's a fantastic idea. Making a show about Gordon and doing that. But then they had to go and just ham it up so much. And it's kind of disappointing in that respect. I still enjoy it, but it's a lot cheesier than it needed to be or should have been.
I don't know. I guess I didn't have a lot of expectations for it going in. And granted, I'm not the most, knowledgeable DC person ever. But I don't know. I found myself, comparing all the comic book TV series that I've been watching. And I would rank it above The Flash, which is kind of boring me these days. And I think one thing I appreciate about Gotham is at least it has ambitions. At least it has narrative complexity to it. I think it fails almost as often as it succeeds, but I would rather go with a show that at least takes those kinds of risks.
That's fair. I can't even remember what the last episode of Flash I watched was about, to be honest. I think something that they let that guy with the sound waves out. And then
that was the last one I saw. So you're 1 week behind like I am.
Have neither of you seen this week's Flash?
I haven't watched it yet, no.
Okay, we'll have to talk about it next week because I have a lot of beef with this show after this week's episode.
Ooh, okay. I'm excited now.
Yeah, so I haven't seen that. I did catch up on Arrow, but
Tell me
Gotham
this.
Didn't do it for me, but the other show I dropped, Sleepy Hollow, man, that show just bombed after its first season. I don't know what the hell happened.
It was so fun last year. I don't know. I feel like Sleepy Hollow's problem is that it only really worked because I think its most appealing aspects were, let's throw crazy American history all together, let's do completely crazy plot twists, and then let's have Ichabod sneak around and disapprove of modern things. And it was a ton of fun. But I think that kind of fundamentally doesn't stretch well past a first season, and I feel like the show might have been better if it had just been 1 year long.
I think it got worse too, it's not just that it wasn't able to stretch, but I mean, it just got cheesy in the second season. It was really making me think of Charmed as I was watching it.
Ouch.
And I hated Charmed, but it was one of those things that I'd be busy. Sometimes I'll be busy working on something and I just leave the TV on in the background and I'll be watching, a rerun of Supernatural or Smallville or something like that, and it's just kind of in the background, not really paying attention. And then Charmed comes on. Afterwards. And there's a certain point in which I just can't take it anymore, even though it's just background noise, and I just have to change the channel. It takes me completely out of whatever work I'm doing.
To ignore.
Yeah, and that's what Sleepy Hollow's been reminding me of this season.
Yikes.
When that angel guy showed up, oh god. That was totally Charmed.
I don't think I made it that far. All I remember was that there was, what's his name, Ollie, who was being used more than Jenny, even though Jenny was made into a main character. And he felt like a network-mandated pretty boy, and I had no idea what he was doing there.
Well, they were trying to have the lovable rogue, but they didn't. They didn't succeed.
Yeah.
So,
too bad.
I got a top 10 list of lovable rogues in the works right now.
Oh, great!
Oh, awesome.
He didn't make my list.
That sounds like fun.
Kat, tell me this.
Okay.
Is Gorilla Grodd in the new episode of Flash?
No.
Okay. They teased him at the end of the last one. Well, they didn't just tease him; they actually flat out showed him.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's another thing that's kind of bugging me about Flash, and I never had this problem with Arrow, and that's something I always appreciated, is I love that as a DC, relative newbie to the DC universe, Arrow drops tons of Easter eggs and introduces tons of characters from the universe, but never makes me, a newbie, feel alienated or like I'm being left out of the party for it. I feel like Flash does that a fair amount. I feel like Flash is gearing itself a little bit too much to knowledgeable audiences, and it kind of turns me off to the series.
Right. Yeah, I get that. There's not a proper build-up in, the Flash. With Arrow, all the characters that you see, sure, there's, a lot of DC Comics characters coming in, but I feel like there's a build-up there to where you get them. It's not like they're gonna have the Atom now on Arrow. Brandon Routh is the Atom, but he didn't just
but they're earning it.
He didn't just come onto the show in his Atom outfit and start fighting crime. I mean, they built that up.
Exactly.
You know?
And I feel like Arrow is schooling me on the DC universe, and I love that because I love learning more. Whereas Flash makes me feel like, well, it's not my problem you don't already know this stuff.
True.
I think with Flash, part of the problem is that it's so Monster of the Week.
Yeah.
And, Arrow kind of escaped that. Like Arrow has this structure in place to be Monster of the Week, but they've kind of avoided that.
I think,
I
think it's a little bit of first season blues. I think Arrow suffered from this too in the first season, where you were right.
It did.
It was mostly Monster of the Week when the Arrow started.
But even so, at this point in Arrow's first season, we still had multiple plot lines going on. I mean, we had
the
with
flashbacks
Tommy and Laurel. We had we were building toward Thea and Roy. We had everything, and of course everything going on with Moira and Malcolm promising the season-long undertaking. Like, they were building toward that, and it was, even at the lowest point of the season, there was still that end goal in sight. Whereas Flash, I feel like, is just starting to spin its wheels.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they need to get moving more towards the Reverse Flash storyline.
Yeah.
Because it's obvious already that's where they're building to. Might as well, just go full speed ahead with that. Pardon the pun.
I wonder if it's going to have that shift like Supernatural did, where Supernatural introduced kind of the more serialized element in the pilot, and then just kind of became Monster of the Week for the first 2/3 of its first season. And then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, it got serialized, and it's last 4 episodes or something. And all of a sudden it was oh, now it's good again, but it just came kind of out of nowhere. Everything just kind of popped back into place.
I never minded that Supernatural did Monster of the Week episodes.
Because they did it well.
Yeah.
And besides, the whole conceit of the show is Supernatural. They're monster hunters, and it was always cool to see them take on, different creatures, and to see how they handled that. So, I never minded the Monster of the Week episodes on that show.
Yeah, I would agree with that because like you're saying, Monster of the Week, I think, fits better with the fundamental concept of the series, right? Whereas Flash is just crying out for them to do something beyond. And now we're fighting another metahuman that was also created by the particle accelerator.
Right.
Yeah, metahuman is the new, Meteor Rock.
Yes!
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Smallville drove that concept into the ground.
Yeah.
And also, apparently, there's this disconnect where Arrow and the Flash exist in the same universe, but they've already got on record saying you're not going to see superpowers in Arrow. But you got all these superpowered people running around. How aren't they ever going to end up in Starling City? Is there a barrier?
They could, because the Clock King already switched over from Arrow to Flash. So
right.
Maybe I think they can do that just so long as the shows themselves remain self-contained.
Right. I realize they're trying to maintain the integrity of the shows and their premises and stuff, but yeah, it is a disconnect when they exist in the same universe, and yet none of the metahumans are going to end up on Arrow, because that's not what they want for that show. When there's, apparently so many of them running around.
I don't know. Mark Guggenheim, apparently after the crossover episode, said he was rethinking whether or not how he felt about having superpowers on the show. Because I guess they enjoyed it quite well after the crossover episode.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
So, I don't know.
I think they could do superpowers on, they've already flirted with it on Flash. I mean, they had the Mirakuru and, all that stuff.
Oh, yeah, the Mirakuru, yeah, they flirt with that. I mean, they were kind of in a corner with that, because they couldn't do Deathstroke without Deathstroke having his powers, his abilities. And so, I think that's where the Mirakuru came from, was an excuse, an explanation for Deathstroke and his abilities from the comics to be a part of the show, without it just, like, coming out of nowhere. Again, they built that up.
Yeah.
They've also had Roz on Arrow as kind of like the central villain right now in the current arc, and, you know, he already, when he talked to Oliver, had, you know, alluded to being alive for, like, you know.
They're being very coy with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
think that's good, though. I like that, like, we know that he's kind of, there's something else beyond just, you know, human to him.
Right.
But that it's very faint. You know, that it's not overly stated. You know, I think that that's the better balance.
I thought we would for sure see the Lazarus Pit when they resurrected Oliver, but no, they haven't yet tipped their hand on that.
No.
We don't even fully know how he got better. They didn't really explain it.
I'm kind of worried they're not going to.
Yeah, I'm kind of worried they're not going to either.
I don't know. I think the way they handled Oliver's resurrection has actually been really lame and disappointing.
It has been, because I'm like, I'm waiting for the explanation, because they can't just say, oh, he survived and they nursed him back to health. I don't know. I thought Arrow was...
It's like, what was it, Dark Knight Rises, you know, like his back's broken. And he's thrown down a pit. But he recovers!
He recovered! I know, that's what frustrated me the most, I think, about these last few episodes, is I was like, of all shows on television, Arrow does so well by death. They're not going to do something as lame and stupid as have Oliver just, after this near-death experience, just magically recover and walk out of the mountains and oh, hey, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of disappointing. Yeah. I'm like, wow, and he recovered from getting stabbed in the abdomen and thrown off a cliff pretty quickly, too.
I know, right?
Yeah, I think they definitely should have put, and we mentioned this when we talked before about, you know, when, I think you had liked the mid-season premiere and Will and I kind of had some reservations, and one of my big reservations was that I really wanted to see, like, some serious change that had happened, you know, like I either wanted them to kind of focus not on Oliver and have it be like, we don't know where he is or what's going on with him, and focus instead on the other people in Starling and show kind of things really devolve, you know?
Right.
In a bad way, and then, you know, have it take a while so that you really miss him, and then have him come back, you know?
Yeah, no, I'm completely with you there. I think that's been another thing for me, that I was like, why did they do the whole near-death thing for him if he just walked it off, you know? Like, that didn't seem to have mattered to the character at all, in which case that made it a really, really cheap audience manipulation tactic, and Arrow is usually so much better than this stuff, that I'm actually really disappointed with the show.
It loses all of its dramatic impact.
Exactly.
Because now, like, the next time he goes to fight Ross, it's gonna be like, well, whatever happens, he'll walk it off.
Yeah, and it retroactively makes the fight in the mid-season finale kind of, it kind of less exciting. It's kind of like, oh, well, it doesn't really matter that much anymore anyway.
It retconned the drama.
Yeah. So I'm pretty disappointed with Arrow these days.
I still like it. It's just that it's disappointing how they handled that.
And the stuff with Felicity was so annoying too. I feel like that's forced.
I'm starting to dislike her as a character.
Yes.
It just feels so forced to me. Like,
yeah. Whenever she starts getting on starts moralizing.
Yeah.
Or just starts moralizing. It's like,
Yeah, that was exactly my response. It felt like the only reason they had her rag him out last week was so that they can further drive a wedge into the perpetual will they or won't they drama of Oliver Felicity. And I wish so much that Oliver Felicity drama would just leave my TV show forever.
Yes.
Because this is not what I signed on to Arrow for.
Why is this even a thing? Why does there have to be Oliver Felicity drama? I mean...
Yeah.
Besides that, Oliver Queen, at least in the comic books, he ends up with Laurel. So, I mean...
Yeah.
And they're doing cheesy shit with Flash in that regard too, in the romance department. And
and another thing is they've had Felicity hook up with every superhero on the show now.
Yeah, I know. She's the love interest of 3 superheroes. To me, also, this is the irony of what's happened to Felicity's character. Is the only reason she was put in this position is because fans wanted her to be, but the result is now she only gets to be the love interest of superheroes, while Laurel gets to go out and be a superhero.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I would have been more satisfied with Felicity's character if she wasn't, like, romantically involved with anybody. Like, you know...
I think it would have worked perfectly, I still say, if, you know, her and Barry had a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And we just kind of saw it as something happening in the background.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a perfect way to have those shows crossing over.
I think so.
Without directly crossing over.
I think the Felicity-Barry relationship felt natural. It felt like there was actual chemistry there. And the other two, like with Ray Palmer, with Oliver, that feels forced. That feels like they're forcing that.
They are.
And on the Flash side, too, they're forcing all this stuff with Barry Allen, too, you know?
Poor Iris. Poor Eddie and Iris. I'm well convinced that at this point, it's possibly before the end of the season or sometime during second season, Iris and Barry are going to hook up, at which point Eddie is going to eventually emerge as a supervillain. Because that will be what drives him into supervillainy, right? He has to be a supervillain, and that will be what turns him to it, because that's always what happens in these stories.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
It's so predictable, unfortunately.
And I realize in the comic books, Iris is supposed to be the Flash's love interest, because that's the way it's written in the comics. But does it have to be that way in the show just because?
Yeah. Well, and they toyed with the possibility of giving her a plot line when they sent her to the newspaper, but then they haven't really done anything with it, and it's like, Iris just feels really useless right now.
I feel exactly the same way. They're not handling the kind of romance side right in that. But yeah, let's move on to some other shows. So, I'm looking at the show notes and it looks like you started on Agent Carter, Kat.
Yeah, I actually watched all 6 episodes and I'm really enjoying that. I'm really enjoying it.
How far are you, Will?
I watched up to episode 3.
Okay. So yeah, what did you think, Kat?
I think it's fantastic. I think,
I love it.
I kind of wish that they could, once they're done, because I realize that a limited run is what makes it so good, I kind of wish that they could develop a series that's just like Peggy and Jarvis, because those 2 characters and those 2 actors are so much fun, and so much fun together, that I want them to keep doing something
The
with
best
it.
scenes of the show are the sines where they're together, interacting with each other.
They're fantastic. They're so much fun together.
They have this weird, this camaraderie from the fact that they're both British people in America, but at the same time they're from such different places.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. They're so different.
So there's this weird dynamic with them. Yeah, I love that show, though. I still say that second episode was brilliant, the way they did that radio drama and everything.
That was great.
I was not expecting to like Jarvis as much as I do, because I thought, okay, well, the butler guy, but he turned out, that actor does a fantastic job, and that's such a well-written character.
Yeah, James Darcy is so perfect in that role. Man, it makes me so glad that they cast him, because I'm with you. I was like, oh, okay, Paul Bettany, he's kind of pleasantly fun in the movies, but he's not really a major component.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But he's so much cooler.
I'm loving that show, so I'm caught up on that and just waiting for the next episode. I also like that this, I don't want to, how can I say this without spoiling it for you, Will? That they've made a tie to somebody in the Avengers with like the current villains.
Oh, okay.
That are in right now. Did you notice that, Kat?
I didn't. I'm gonna have to go do my research now. That's really cool. I didn't realize that.
So it's not one of the actual Avengers, but it's somebody with the Avengers. And there's a tie with the villain group or something. At least
Hydra?
That's what I'm picking up on. No.
Okay. So no Hydra references so far.
No, it's what they've talked about already. It's this Leviathan.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, Leviathan.
Yeah, but it's you can see this kind of weird connection, and maybe I'm wrong, but I'm seeing something that I'm thinking is there.
That sounds really cool.
So yeah, I really like that show, and that show hit just right off the bat.
Was really great. Well, and going back real quick to what you were saying about the radio drama, what I enjoyed about is it in the first couple of episodes where they did the juxtaposition of what's her name, Betty the nurse, who's always being captured and having to be rescued by Captain America, with scenes of her like beating up a bunch of people.
That was in the second episode.
I really like that juxtaposition, and I think what it enhances for me is that I really appreciate about the show is the way it tackles head on the fact that the 1940s was a deeply sexist era. And they use Peggy Carter's character, I think, in that way to examine that in really interesting ways, especially because it's so easy to pretend that sexism and racism in previous eras didn't exist, that I like that Agent Carter is really upfront without that.
Or to over-preach on it, which some things have done as well, which I think they hit the right balance with Carter, where they have her and she's not just sitting there like saying, I'm the victim. She's doing what she needs to do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Like they capture that perfectly, and I think they capture really well the idea that she's a woman who broke through the glass ceiling, and look at how hard it was, but look how amazing she is at it.
Yeah, and there's other things too. Like I love Agent Carter, so I could talk about this for almost forever. But, so a few other things I want to bring up. One was that they made kind of a real quick joke hint that she's Union Jack from the comics.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, I didn't realize there was someone named that in the comics. That's cool.
Yeah, you know the reference I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know the moment you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, and that's that. There's a character in the comics named Union Jack that's basically the British version of Captain America.
Oh, that would be so cool. Now I really want them to do more with her character after this season.
Yeah, so they made like this hint, it was just like a joke. I mean, it might not even be, they could still bring in like a Union Jack that's not even connected to her, but they made a quick little reference, and I was like, oh, that's so awesome, and just completely unexpected. But yeah, there's that, and what was the other thing I was gonna say that I've been really digging on the show is, the way they introduced the female dormitories.
Yeah.
That was a thing,
Yeah, I had no idea.
Hello.
And they get a lot of great humor out of it too. Like there's one episode when all the women are discussing how they're sneaking food out of the cafeteria, or like the fact that even though there's the rule that no man is allowed above the first floor, of course all the women are sneaking men up above the first floor to their room.
Oh, of course.
It's great, yeah. It adds like a whole fun dynamic to it, but not just that, it's just that this is something that really existed, and it's something you don't hear about too often. I've just kind of heard about it offhand in some movies or TV shows back in the day and stuff, but it's like every single time a story comes up that has something related to it, I'm like, oh yeah, that did exist.
Yeah, and it gives it a great historical context.
Yeah.
I actually really like what it does with giving me a really strong sense of the 1940s. It's really cool.
And they got that look of the first Captain America movie down.
Awesome.
I mean, it has that kind of like, bright colored neo-noir kind of thing going on, and it works.
Well, this is the moment at which I now have to confess that Captain America is probably the first one is probably the only MCU film I haven't seen, but because of Agent Carter, I'm probably going to have to go watch it now just for Peggy Carter's character.
Yeah, go watch it.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, you've seen part of it because you watched Agent Carter in the beginning of Agent Carter.
You got the ending spoiled. Captain America gets frozen and ends up in the present day.
Hey! Hey, I might not have known that. I might have just completely forgotten its relevance in the Avengers.
So yeah, that's exciting. I'm really happy with that, and I'm really looking forward to what Marvel's going to be doing with Daredevil. And Will and I, when we were talking on the Better Call Saul podcast, we were talking about how Marvel now has negotiations with Sony to use Spider-Man.
I know. I'm kind of dreading this.
You're dreading it?
I don't want to see yet another teenage Peter Parker gaining his powers. We've already done this twice in the last.
I don't think they're going to do that. I mean, Kevin Feige is going to be involved with the new Spider-Man movie, and he's smart enough, he's savvy enough to know that that's been done.
Well, they said that they're casting a teenage Spider-Man, and they're going back to Spider-Man in high school.
They're doing a high school Spider-Man, but I don't...
They could still do that without having it be his origin.
I really hope so.
I think, I mean, especially since Kevin Feige is involved, I've heard, internally at Marvel Studios, they've set a new rule now where no origin stories. They don't want to do any more origin stories.
Okay, good.
So I think that's going to extend to Spider-Man. Of course, it's hard to say because
Sony has creative control.
Sony has full creative control. So if Sony says they want to redo the origin, Marvel can't tell them no.
Which I'm kind of glad for. I understand why Sony is making this deal with Marvel, but at the same time, I feel like the more comic book properties competing with Marvel, the better it is for everyone all around. I don't know.
In this case, they still are kind of competing with them,
sure,
but working with them at the same time, which is an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. So, I mean, maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. But I think my response to that was a kind of, this is not necessarily going to be a good thing.
I'm hopeful. I think if they do it right, it could come out really well.
Sure.
I mean, I'm hoping for a movie at least on par with Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi.
We can
hope.
Well,
the question is where do you rank Spider-Man 2? Because personally, Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite comic book movies ever.
Yeah, mine too. That is one of the best. So hopefully we get something of that caliber from this.
Well, here's what I want, is I was reading up on Carol Danvers, and I couldn't help noticing that she was a key part of the Civil War story. So I really want Captain Marvel to appear in the next Captain America movie.
Oh,
they've been talking about Captain Marvel for quite a while.
Yeah, I don't think Captain Marvel's going to appear in the next Captain America. They definitely want to get her in there. They've got the whole Captain Marvel movie has been announced and set, so she is definitely going to be part of the MCU, but I don't think she's going to be in Captain America. The rumors are saying Spider-Man is going to show up in Captain America 3. Because the rumors are...
Because he pays heavily into the
because Captain America 3 is the Civil War story, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously that must be where they're going to include Spider-Man. And I guess I can't help, just as someone who would like to see more female superheroes out there, it would make me really happy if they could maybe introduce Carol Danvers in Civil War prior to giving her own movie.
That would, I agree, that would be good, but...
I could actually see them doing that, I think Civil War might actually introduce a lot of characters. I think what Marvel's gonna start doing is instead of going okay, we need a movie for this character, and we need a movie for this character, and this character, I could totally see them start to weave in characters throughout movies where they're not necessarily the star of the movie, but they might be in 3 movies in a year.
Oh, yeah,
maybe it's more about the storyline rather than the individual character.
Yeah, I've always felt that the thing that I love so much about the MCU is that it feels like a TV show almost more than like a movie series,
Sure.
Well, I feel like right now Civil War is too crowded as it is, because they're going to put in they're introducing Black Panther in that film.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, wow.
Yep. They've announced, that Black Panther's going to make his first appearance in there.
It kind of has to be crowded, though, doesn't it? Because, that's what Civil War is. It's you have to have enough participants.
I'm not sure how they're going to play it out, because, you can't do the comic book Civil War storyline with just one movie. that's impossible.
Yeah. Well, it might just be the start of it.
Right.
We don't know if it's going to complete it.
That's a good point. Maybe it'll carry out across, like, the Black Panther and Captain Marvel movies or something like that, which could be really interesting.
Because it seems to be that the events of Avengers 2 are probably going to be what, starts Stark down the path of initiating Civil War.
My theory was going to be that Civil War was going to start in Captain America 3 and continue through the subsequent movies until we get to Infinity War, when Thanos shows up.
So it's going to be like the distraction.
Yeah, so once Thanos shows up, everybody's going to be realize we have to stop fighting and get together for this, because this is pretty bad.
That could be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Somebody once explained Game of Thrones to me in that way. It's like all these people squabbling over, who owns this tree or something like that, and then while they're arguing, they don't see that a giant meteor is coming towards them.
Right.
So it's
that really works, because I feel like that's basically what the Avengers is about. Like, the first movie is everybody's squabbling with one another. Oh, hey, let's all unite because there's a grander threat that we all need to deal with.
Right. That's a very common comic book trope.
Especially in the Marvel universe, from what I can tell.
Yeah, especially in the Marvel universe. That's one of the big differences between the Marvel and the DC universes. The DC heroes get along probably way too well, all the time. And Marvel's
from my understanding, there's probably going to be a big, extensive fight between Batman and Superman in next year's movie.
Well, the footage they showed, because there was some footage that I don't know if either of you saw it, but it was at Comic-Con they had, so there was some cell phone recorded video off of screen of it, where they showed, Batman and Superman kind of facing eyeing each other off, looking at each other.
Batman's the big exception to that DC Comics rule, because Batman doesn't really get along with anybody. In fact, Batman has all...
That's why he's the best character on DC.
In fact, before Batman even joins the Justice League, he's already written up battle plans for how he's going to defeat everybody in the Justice League.
Okay, that would make for, if that was how Batman v Superman was handled, that would be really entertaining.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's what it's going to be. I think that Batman is going to see Superman as a threat.
Right.
And so he's going to be working on stuff. And from the footage they released, I don't know if either of you saw it, but it looks like Batman's got some kind of gear going on. It's not just him in a costume, so they're going for more of that, Batman that might actually be able to take on Superman kind of thing.
Zack Snyder is heavily influenced by Frank Miller, so he's taken a lot of inspiration for this from The Dark Knight Returns, which basically, as part of its climax, it has Batman fighting Superman, who is, in that comic, Superman is basically a tool of the government sent to take out Batman, who the government feels has gone out of control. And Zack Snyder has been really upfront and open with that's his major inspiration for this movie. And we even see, the Batman symbol in the logo is the Batman symbol that's on his chest and from The Dark Knight Returns.
Okay.
And he has the look too, the costume has that look too.
The costume has that look too.
With the short ears.
And he already said Ben Affleck's going to be playing an older Batman, which that was about an old and gray Batman.
Okay, so he's supposed to be maybe in his 40s or 50s?
Yeah.
Oh, that actually sounds pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
God, do you guys remember the backlash when that news came out?
When Ben Affleck was announced?
Oh, yes,
the
Ben
Batfleck
Affleck
news.
as Batman.
I'm still not sold. And after they cast Will Smith as Deadshot, my primary concern with DC is that they're more concerned with casting names with star power rather than casting the right actor for the role.
All right, they should have got Deadshot from Arrow to just be Deadshot, because he does a perfect job.
I know, he's great fun.
Yeah.
Marvel's definitely been better at building up these long-term development of these characters and picking people that aren't necessarily huge. I mean, they got Robert Downey Jr., who's huge, but they also kind of revitalized his career.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr.
They are what made Robert Downey Jr. huge, because I mean, he is Tony Stark now, and I think that's what everyone in the world associates him with. Like prior to that, everyone associated him with.
I think prior to Iron Man and the casting, if you asked most of the fans who their dream Iron Man would have been, the answer was already Robert Downey Jr.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah, but at the same time, his career was kind of in the dumps. But that kind of made him more like a Tony Stark type, because he was this kind of wild,
Yeah. He was already like Tony Stark in real life, because he was like this wild playboy. He had drug issues. Tony Stark in the comics has alcoholism problems. So I think that's where the thinking came from,
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So they definitely, they worked together. It worked out well, but they were probably able to get him at a good rate because his career wasn't at a great place at the time. Of course, now his rates are all renegotiated and he's the most expensive part of the whole MCU,
but he is also the most beloved. I don't know if I've ever encountered a fictional character that not only does everyone love this character, not only does everyone love this actor as this character, but like even non-comic book fans watch it with no idea who Iron Man is and go, ooh, I really like that guy.
What makes it work is like Robert Downey Jr. just has fun with it. He's comfortable with it. He doesn't look down on the role as this is something I'm doing for a paycheck.
Yeah.
Or, you could tell he's really enjoying himself when he does these movies. I think that really works to his advantage when playing the role, because you can feel his enthusiasm, so you get enthusiastic about it. And
I agree.
Really,
yeah.
When you said that that Robert Downey Jr. was probably the first pick most fans had on their mind for a Tony Stark, it also makes me think of there's only one other case I can think of where somebody was cast. Patrick Stewart is an X-Men.
That was perfect casting.
I had an ancient issue of Wizard magazine where before anybody was even talking about making an X-Men movie, they used to do this feature where they pick a random comic book each month and then they cast a movie about it. And that was a monthly feature in Wizard magazine. And they did the X-Men, and they chose Patrick Stewart to be Professor X.
Oh, everybody did. I remember I used to. Do you remember back when the internet had it was made up of services like Prodigy and America Online and CompuServe?
Yeah.
Back in those days, I used to use Prodigy, and the funny story is that I charged up some insane bill because they used to charge you by the minute of using the internet.
Ouch.
But yeah, I used to just go around and go on forums for things on Prodigy, and there was constantly chat about how would you cast this movie and stuff like that. And every time it was Patrick Stewart for Charles Xavier. And then you'd see weird random ones for other people. Everybody wanted to cast Wolverine, but nobody kind of quite had a handle on who could do it, So, you'd get people saying, it should be Danzig.
Oh, yeah, Danzig, really. Okay, sure.
Because he looks like Wolverine, and he's short like Wolverine is supposed to be,
Right.
Because that's the one really off thing about Hugh Jackman's Wolverine.
He's really tall.
He's really tall.
I'm okay with
Wolverine's
that.
supposed to be really short.
It's like having Daniel Craig as a blonde Bond, because it's okay, I know it's not canon with the books, but he's so good in the role that it's can we let's overlook this one little cosmetic thing.
Yeah, it's so funny though, because you get these
apparently
the casting ideas.
Apparently they originally wanted to cast Dougray Scott as Wolverine.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do it because he was in doing some
other
MI2. Schedule conflict.
Yeah, MI2, yeah.
Yeah.
But,
I like Dougray Scott, but I think they kind of dodged a bullet there because I don't think he would have been the right fit for the role the way Hugh Jackman has been.
Hugh Jackman nailed Wolverine for the same reasons Robert Downey Jr. nails Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Because because Hugh Jackman totally gets into the part. He's very enthusiastic about it. He loves doing it. He's been very clear about that this whole time.
And he puts
himself through hell to get in shape for that, too.
And he gets the role. X-Men is a weird batch of movies because I feel like they have some casting that is just so eerily perfect. Because I would say those two, and then add in Kelsey Grammer as Beast. Such perfect.
That was another one that people
casting.
expected.
And then on the other end of the scale, we have like Halle Berry as Storm, and James Marsden as Cyclops, and Anna Paquin as Rogue, and I just want to cry because like none of them even come close to
Theoretically, Halle Berry should have been able to play Storm, but no, she stunk in that role.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, is that all of those roles you just mentioned, those are kind of like the perfect casting choices for those roles, but they didn't work.
Right,
you
they
know?
didn't work.
Well, and the writing
it's like that if somebody just casted it based on their fantasy, you know,
I think
that's a lot of the ones that would have been cast.
I think the Halle Berry's problem was she just wasn't into it. She didn't care. I don't think she cared at all doing the movie.
I don't think she has enough presence. I don't know. Storm is, she's second in command. She's supposed to be this, like, almost larger than life, powerful figure, and Halle Berry just really doesn't have that.
Right. I don't know, like, see, that's where I get the idea that I think she could do it if she wanted to, if she got into it.
Uh-huh.
I don't think she has the respect for the character.
I don't think she has the respect for the characters or even the material to really,
Sure, I can see that. I'll say this, like Ian McKellen, I don't think of as being the most obvious Magneto, and but I think he respects the character in the way you're talking about.
And it's his dynamic with Patrick Stewart as Xavier that makes it work so well too.
Yeah,
yes.
Their friendship is so integral to the part.
Yeah, casting Ian McKellen opposite Patrick Stewart, that was a really good choice because Magneto and Professor X's relationship is at the heart of the X-Men.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you have to have two actors that have that chemistry, that can play off of each other like that.
And you want to talk about perfect casting that isn't necessarily what people expected, but just ended up being so brilliant. What about X-Men First Class with the young Magneto?
Yeah. Oh, Michael Fassbender,
that's
yes.
That's exactly what I was going to say is I love Ian McKellen, but I think especially in Days of Future Past, Michael Fassbender feels so much like Magneto to me in that movie. Like, just, he's sublime.
He is.
He's
the perfect Magneto. He gets, like, every aspect of that character.
He's so perfect. Also, I super, super love James McAvoy as Xavier, even though he's, like, a completely different Xavier than we've ever seen before. I think he has just brought so much new dimension to the role that it's made me love Xavier more than ever.
And again, it's his chemistry with Fassbender, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
They're fantastic.
Again. Oh, yeah. Again, that's another thing they had to do when casting First Class, is they had to get two actors for Xavier and Magneto who had that chemistry, because, again, that relationship is the core of the series.
Yeah.
If the chemistry between them two doesn't work, then the whole thing falls apart.
Exactly.
And,
so X-Men has definitely gotten, I feel like the further this series has gone, the better they've gotten at casting. Like Days of Future Past, I felt like the core characters were all played by the right actor. And I think it really helped the movie.
I think the only problem with Days of Future Past came in because of Bryan Singer. I think he was because I had issues with Days of Future Past.
Oh, really? Okay.
But almost all of them had to do with the direction.
Oh, I love Days of Future Past. What were your issues with the film?
Yeah, I'm interested in this.
There were parts that, I don't know, maybe I was just spoiled by First Class. I really liked First Class and the way they handled it. And in Days of Future Past, there were just some kind of like cheesy parts. Most of the stuff that kind of took place in the dark future. It was just too, like, over the top. I mean, it was always nighttime every time you saw the future, and you know, like, when it showed Storm for the first time, her eyes flickered to, like, a white cloudy thing, and then went back to normal again, like, for no reason.
Oh, I thought she was checking the weather. That's what I always think of that moment as. Like, she's Storm, she's testing things out.
But it's like, there's so many little things like that just, it's too fan servicey that it becomes distracting to me. And it's something that I've noticed has been one of the problems with when Bryan Singer has been at the helm. And there was I still remember, like, the worst part of the first X-Men movie was when, Storm said, what do you call a toad that gets hit by lightning?
Okay. I'm going to point out right now that line was not concocted by Bryan Singer. It was actually Joss Whedon.
Yeah, that's Joss Whedon's fault.
He's come out and said, I'm responsible for that line, and I know everybody hates it.
Yeah, but Bryan Singer was helming.
Bryan Singer.
So it's his choice to leave that in. And even if it was Joss Whedon's line, I bet the way Joss Whedon would have directed the line would have come out very differently.
Sure. I don't know. I guess.
So I think his would have come out in a more like witty way, whereas Bryan Singer's was too dramatic.
I've heard they blamed Halle Berry's. The way she spoke the line was not the way it was written.
I blame Singer. I think he took it too seriously.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess my feeling is because after Days of Future Past came out, I went back and rewatched the trilogy, including The Last Stand, because I just wanted to see how terrible it was. Because you're a giant masochist. Which it's still terrible.
It was preparation for 50 Shades of Grey. You just wanted to get in touch with your inner masochist.
Yes, exactly. It's still a terrible movie. But anyway, I don't know. Like X-Men, the first one, what struck me the most is it feels very much like a director who has not yet figured out the source material and a studio that is really, really nervous about this. Like, there's this whole, I don't know, like one of the things I really appreciate about Days of Future Past is the frequency with which we see everyone using their powers. Because that feels like X-Men to me. And,
right.
And as the very first X-Men movie, then like they do so with great infrequency. There's a whole ton of hesitancy. And so I guess I feel like, from my perspective, is I can totally see that with Bryan Singer in the first film. I think it's because he himself was still figuring out the source material and the right tone for the source material, especially because this was when he was trying to make a comic book movie that was more grounded 3 years after Joel Schumacher unleashed Batman and Robin upon the world.
Sure, yeah.
I think that it's when I look back on the X-Men movies, as far as like how I'd rank them, I'd probably say that my favorite is either X-Men 2 or First Class. And then after that, it would probably be Days of Future Past, then 1, and then, just don't even bother talking about any other thing.
Well, fortunately, The Last Stand no longer exists because Days of Future Past retconned it out of existence.
Yes.
That was the one thing they did that I liked, but at the same time, I was kind of a little upset that it the way it brought everyone kind of back, and it was like, there was a part of me that didn't like it. I liked that it retconned Days of Future Past, but I didn't like that, it was just too much of like a everything worked.
I'm the opposite. I'm glad that they brought Cyclops and Jean Grey back. Those characters should definitely be part of the franchise going forward.
Yeah.
There was no...
But they're continuing with the First Class crew anyway, so it would have them at a younger age, because they're both going to be in...
they're...
in Apocalypse.
Yeah, they're introducing younger versions in Apocalypse now.
Yeah. But I agree with Will. I think I liked it because it felt like such a great wrap up for the original trilogy, like basically saying this is probably the last time we're going to get to see them, and so we can have a happy ending where everybody has been brought back to life,
Yeah, just for me, sometimes when the fan service goes too far, it starts to get on my nerves. I had the same problem with the last Harry Potter movie. I thought that was just way too fan servicey to the point that it just became distracting.
Are you talking about the epilogue scene?
No, I'm talking about the entire last movie.
Really?
I liked the second to last movie. I liked Deathly Hallows Part 1, but I just did not like 2 because I think they took too much time to try to kind of give all these characters these moments that they didn't need, and then they took moments that were supposed to be more like subtle and intelligent, and then they turned them into like big battles, which I really disliked. I hated Harry and Voldemort's last standoff in the movie. In the book, it was like a battle of wits, And in the movie, it was like they were just kind of flying around.
Sure.
And, I didn't like that, and I think they tried to make, Neville Longbottom look too much like a hero, where he already had kind of a good moment, and that's all he needed, and they tried to give him too many, and so it's stuff like that really kind of bothered me, but so whenever stuff gets like too fan servicey like that, it usually starts to bother me. But so yeah, those are kind of the issues I had with Days of Future Past. Like I said, I think that I was surprised at how well First Class was able to avoid that, and that's kind of why I was a little depressed with Days of Future Past Days of Future Past was that it looked like they trampled that, like there was, like he'd created this kind of more grounded, this kind of thing that worked better, and it avoided all those kind of like really fan servicey kind of moments I felt that felt gratuitous and off.
I think,
and then Days of Future Past, they were all back.
I think more than just being fan service, I think the ending was kind of like, an acknowledgement that, Brett Ratner's movie was just not worth remembering.
Well, I like that aspect of it. I just wish that they had, ended it with, a little bitter to the sweet.
Right. Yeah, I get ya.
I like that they retconned it, because it needed to happen, I think. But I just
don't know.
necessarily like how they retconned it.
I think the only way they could have ended it by having some bitterness amongst the suite is if there was any possibility of them continuing on in the future storyline. And that's very, very, very unlikely. Like, beyond the fact that we're probably going to see Patrick Stewart in the third Wolverine film, we're unlikely to see any of these actors as these characters again in this particular continuity. In which case,
that's
if
true.
you end with something bitter, then I think that's going to kind of go, well, wait, what's going to happen next? Because kind of like how in the past storyline, they ended it on something of a cliffhanger, like... But we have promise, we have assurance that there's going to be more, and so it's okay that they ended it in such an uncertain place.
I don't know,
I think if they had done something like
Wolverine's perspective, it did kind of have some bitterness to it, because you're Wolverine, and you see that Jean Grey is alive again, and you're thinking, great, and then Cyclops is alive, and you're like, darn, no.
I think the way I would have done it, I would have had a consequence for Wolverine's return. I would have made it so that, okay, everyone's back alive, it's a happy ending, everything. And then I would have ended on something like, but Wolverine ended up paying some sort of price for that. Like, maybe he lost his memories or something, so he's like back to ground zero again. Or not ground zero, back to the first step again. Like he was in the first X-Men movie where he didn't know any of these people. And he doesn't know much about himself. Or something like that, just to kind of show that, like, yes, this huge thing happened, but it does have a cost.
That there was consequence.
Well, Wolverine and memory loss go hand in hand.
Yeah, so that's why it could have worked, in my opinion. But, or, if he had, on the off chance, even if he had just died or something because of it, or, would remain kind of in some weird trapped state. And
remain trapped at the bottom of the ocean?
Well, that couldn't have happened, really, because...
He's Wolverine.
I guess, I don't know.
But... I guess I worry that would have been too dark of an ending for the future storyline. I don't know. Right. I guess I feel like the future storyline deserved to have a happy ending because it needed something that was a really stark contrast to the Sentinels have taken over the world's storyline where we found them at the start of the movie.
Yeah, I agree with you in that aspect. It's just that, I don't know. There are other things that bothered me too in that movie. I think the future Sentinels bothered me. Because it was like, oh, okay, so now you're saying that Mystique's mutant power is that she can not only look like anybody, but have everything that they can have, and yet the character could never do it, but somehow it was able to, using that mutant's genes to enact that, so it's stuff like that. Just, It felt like too convenient in like the opposite way. Like normally you're worried about something being too convenient because it makes it, like the heroes are miraculously saved. This is like the opposite.
Yeah. Sure.
Like the characters are miraculously placed into a situation that's too hard, And I don't like that either. So.
No, like I totally get that. I think for me personally, I guess the reason is why it doesn't bother me as much as I know it does others, because I've seen others express that same frustration with the film, is I understand the reasoning why they did it. Because, right, it specifically ties Mystique into the Sentinels to make them more dangerous, which makes that moment of stopping Mystique from killing Trask even more important than for the simple fact that it also involves the government, you know? Like, I think it conceptually adds something.
They want Mystique to be, like, central to the film.
Yeah.
So that was their way of doing that.
Well, I gotta start kind of wrapping things up now, so.
Yeah. You could probably go on all night about this.
Yeah. This is the repeat of Tuesday. We went way off topic, but hey, it was fun.
Exactly.
So we'll wrap this up. Thank you everybody for listening. This is the Weekly Set podcast. We tape every Thursday night. Don't necessarily get it up every Friday, but we try. You can now find us on iTunes and at our site, TVEnthusiast.com. Thank you for listening. Good night.
Night.
All right, good night.
If you would like to voice your opinion, send an email to theweeklyset@TVEnthusiast.com. TV Enthusiast is a part of the Enthusiast Media Network. Stay tuned to TV Enthusiast and the Weekly Set podcast for more coverage of all of your favorite shows. 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 Of all of your